Welcome back, everybody. My name is Michelle Provoost, and we're about to start with the third part of the online symposium of the International Newtown Day 2020, Taking Back Housing. This is a symposium organized by the International Newtown Institute and the Independent School for the City, and aims to explore and discuss ways towards a more democratic and alternative ways of housing. Earlier today, this morning, we discussed the need for the democratization of our housing, and we looked at the various Dutch initiatives for housing cooperatives, as well as collective housing. In the upcoming hour, we will look across our state borders to inspiration from abroad. Collective forms of self-built housing are already commonplace in countries surrounding us. In Germany, more than 150 collectives are part of the Mietshauser Syndikat. And in the city of Zurich, in Switzerland, a staggering 250 Genossenschaften have been realized. Two speakers, Han van de Wetering and Lina Hurlin, will discuss the different projects that they are part of and will explain the possibilities and also the challenges that come up during such a process. Afterwards, we will reflect on these two issues with Darinka Czischke from the TU Delft in search for tips and tricks for the Netherlands. But first, I'd like to invite Han van de Wetering on Zoom, one of the leading experts in cooperative housing developments, to tell us about the Genossenschaften in Zurich. Han van de Wetering is not only an urbanist and architect with his own urban design studio in Zurich, he also speaks from personal experience as he is an inhabitant of one of those buildings of a Genossenschaft. Welcome, Han van de Wetering.
Thank you for this introduction.
Go ahead, floor is yours.
Yes, okay. Well, happy to be here as well. Thanks for the invitation. I think it's a very important issue. I will now put my screen on. Yes. And now I have to... is it visible?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. So thanks for the introduction, and yes, I want to place all this question about these housing cooperatives on a bigger scale, but also I want to talk about my own experience as I live in cooperation housing cooperative myself. And maybe the first thing, when as an urbanist, there are like three main challenges dealing with the city, the future of the city, and these three things are for me quite important, like the retreating public sector. So we are more dependent on good private initiatives for our cities. We have social development where our societies are more and more diverse. We have to take into account this and all the things about sustainability, etc. And well, if you look to the developments today, it's rather an opposite development. All these challenges are done from my point of view, in a wrong way. There are some headlines here on the left of headlines of articles in Dutch newspapers showing all these problems which exist. I think you talked about this this morning, but for me it's clear that we need a new urban agenda, and I think these Zurich housing cooperatives, they could be a source of inspiration dealing with these challenges. I want to talk about three things. I first want to explain a little bit why this cooperative is an interesting organizational model for the future. I want to talk about this also about how it can help, how it can support, also how it could be an instrument also for a good and qualitative urban development. And last but not least, I want to talk about the social factor of cooperatives. So first theme is the model of cooperation. I don't think I have to explain this, what a cooperative is about, but I think the main thing is still quite important. So the joint self-help is the basic purpose of a cooperation. That means someone has a problem and this person can't solve it alone. So he needs more people. And this problem is not something only this person has, but more people have. So it's a problem or an issue which deals for the whole society. So I think this last sentence is important. So cooperative is not about making profit or gaining lots of money. So it's really about general welfare. It's a purpose which deals with the needs of the society. So that's, I think, an important issue. If we talk about the cooperatives in Zurich, so what's maybe special about Zurich? First of all, they exist already over 100 years. They were founded the beginning of the 20th century. And the interesting thing is that these cooperatives, they were really part of the urban planning strategy at that time to solve the housing shortage. So it was really part of the planning strategy. And I think other cities now today, like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, where you talked about this morning, it's exactly the same question. Speciality of Zurich is that there are lots of over 250 different small and middle-sized cooperatives. That's maybe different with most German cities, where you have maybe 3 or 4 bigger organizations. Lina, you can maybe talk about it later. But that makes in Zurich, this small scale, make these cooperatives very flexible. There's lots of initiative, innovation. They respond relatively fast to changing circumstances. And there's also this high diversity. So in total, they help for this open city, which is accessible for all. But there are also cooperatives with very specific target groups, for instance, single women, large families. This is this image here of the cooperative Brunenhof. But also, now it's a new one for high sensitive people who don't like radiation, things like that. So everyone, even these people, can still stay in the city, live in the city. I think that's a very nice thing. And another aspect is this urban renewal, which takes place always on a small scale, because these cooperatives in Zurich, they are small. Maybe if you have to renovate or renew the buildings, there's only about 40 to 250 dwellings. So it means also a neighborhood will not change completely, where everyone has to get out. So this also supports social stability. An important thing is also that these cooperatives are really independent organizations. So there's no leading role of the government. There's also no direct funding of the government, but of course there is an active cooperation. There are some general objectives, I think, for the cooperatives in Zurich. And I can explain a little bit with this why I really prefer to live in a cooperative and not in an own house and not in private rent. The first thing is the cost. I don't want to pay too much for my house or where I live. And that's a cooperative is interesting because there's no profit motive. There's no land price speculations. And that means that the rent is about 20 to 30% lower than the private rent. But also if you buy, of course, and if you own an own house, there are lots of, if you buy a new house, there's lots of people that want to make profit out of it. So it's always more expensive than actually really needed. Then there's also the question about quality. And I think that's a major thing. I live in a cooperative because the housing quality is much higher than when you do private rent, or if you even buy your own house. So at least I can't make it so that it will have such a quality. So for me, that's these Genossenschaften or cooperatives in Zurich. They build in a very high level because they don't have the profit in front as priority, but housing, making good housing. A third thing, which is for me now, I have 3 children, and this is quite important to have this community and cooperation. That's really perfect. I don't think if you have private rent, if you have your own house, that it is so self-evident that you have this cooperation with your neighbors, etc. Another thing is also, I'm quite clumsy. If something is broken, I can repair it myself. And it's very comfortable for me just to call the cooperative or my neighbor to repair things I've broken in my dwelling. And last but not least, I think it's also very important, there's always a mixed housing offer. And that means that if my personal circumstances will change, for instance, we first got 2 children, then 3, and we could move within our cooperative, we could move to a larger larger dwelling. And that means children can stay at the same school. I don't have to move a long way. And that's also very, very comfortable. So that's why I think for me, I don't want other rent. I don't want to own my own house. Yes, so that's. I think there are lots of interesting facts about this. Why this is comfortable. There's also this question about financing these cooperatives. And of course, if you have an old cooperative, it's not so difficult because you have enough buffer to make new projects. But if you're a new cooperative, it's quite a challenge, I would say. In Zurich, there are new cooperatives like Kalkbreite. But first of all, I think these cooperatives in Zurich, they're very creative with getting their money, their fundings, they have interesting interest-free loans of private individuals who have too much money and don't know what to do with it. But I think the most important thing is the support by the city. And in Zurich, there's only indirect support. So they give interest-free loans. They get it back again, so they don't even lose money, if you would say that. And they lease land, so it's also not something you lose money with. And that's, I think, a quite important thing, especially if you start, you need the support of the city. And I think also in the Netherlands or in other cities where have these initiatives, you really have to support these cooperatives and these initiatives. Another aspect, if we talk about this cooperative, is that it's not social housing in Zurich. It's not social housing in the classical way because that's organized by the city itself. Of course, they do social housing, the cooperatives. If they lease land from the city or have these interest-free loans from the city, there are certain conditions. For instance, that they have to build 10 or 2% of the dwellings they have to rent to poor people. And the important thing is you need like also richer people for this cooperative so that you can finance it. And that's why I think that's an important aspect as well. So the cooperative is not so much the support for the poorest, because that exists already, but it's more this middle class. And that's something Zurich found out also, that this middle class is very important for this social stability within the whole city. You need them to connect also maybe the rich and the poor classes. And that's a main item, I think, is also often a little bit forgotten. It's not about really social housing, but it's especially for the middle class, which is important for quality of the city. And if you want to attract this middle class or these richer, wealthier residents, of course, the demands on quality is very high. And that's why you also, in Zurich, it's always realized by competitions. This second theme for me is how cooperatives can be used as an instrument for sustainable qualitative development. As I said, City of Zurich has this indirect support by leasing land or interest-free loans, and it's always supported by special conditions. And that depends on the housing policy in the city. It changes. It's already 100 years, and every time they change a little bit the policy, and these cooperatives help to realize this policy. For instance, since the 1990s, they wanted to have more the middle class in the city, and the Genossenschaften, they realized 14,000 attractive, affordable family homes within 10 years without many costs for the city. So it's almost for free you can realize your policy, urban development policy. I tell a little bit what is actual now in Zurich. It's about densification, or I don't know what the real English word for it, urban infill. Zurich is expecting 80,000 more inhabitants by 2035, and these cooperatives, they have to do that. You see some images. This is the housing cooperative Grafica in the western part of Zurich, where they replaced existing buildings with new, thicker, higher buildings, and they made also the public space more attractive. Another part of this strategy of densifying the city is to activate difficult places. There are lots of places in Zurich, but it's also in all cities along from railroads or the highways or along from feeder roads, which no one uses, no one can think about that someone can make a good project here. And that's also something which is done by the cooperatives. It's an example of Kraftwerk in Czischke areal in the north of Zurich, a place where you never expect, a normal private developer can never develop a project with this kind of quality. There are some other images here, also a railroad, a very small area, and you can really realize new attractive housing situations there. Then another theme at the moment is, of course, this sustainable development. This is their very, very high sustainability standards. And that's interesting because often people say, well, why the cooperatives, they have to do everything. Even all these requests about sustainable development, isn't it too much? And then it's actually the contrary, because, for instance, car-free housing, it wasn't possible in Zurich 10 years ago, and now they changed the law, and now it's possible. And if you have car-free housing, your projects get so much easier. The cost will halve because you don't need these underground parking garages. And that's something which goes together, doing it more in an easy way, more cheaper, and at the same time, it's also sustainable. An important thing in Zurich is also that it's not only about housing. So there's an example of Kalkbreite. That should be more space for cultural facilities, healthcare, etc. This is image here on the left. It's also Kalkbreite. It's a conference room you can rent. I rent it off. When I have too many guests in my office, I can rent this. It's very, very practical. I don't need myself a big conference hall. Yes, the theme is active ground floors. That's interesting because that's something that's quite difficult now in cities to activate them. But Genossenschaften, they have so many activities that can activate all these ground floors, which is very interesting for a city. Then the last theme I want to talk about is the social factor. And the main thing with this is that you make housing good quality, but also affordable. And then one strategy of that is a compact building and compact living. So in Switzerland, in average, one person uses 45 square meters, and in Genossenschaften is about 30, so a lot lower. And that, if you want to do it in quality, you need, of course, a very good floor plan. So it's still, it's smaller, but it should still have this quality. So you need very good architects to do this. This is an example of the house I live in, for instance, which is very good organized. And at the same time, of course, if you do compact building, you have a lower energy consumption, and that makes also a project more sustainable. Car-free housing, I talked about it, helps a lot, huge cost savings, but you can also do something else. If you don't have a car parking place, you can maybe, that's in near Bern, you can make a sauna, for instance. It's all just that what you want. And then, of course, sharing facilities, it makes a project also less expensive. You don't need to build for every dwelling everything. And that's also something which is done in these cooperatives. For instance, of outdoor space, now at the moment for the climate change is also an important aspect to have these attractive green areas, but there's also a social factor because here you meet your neighbors and you use the space together. There's some more examples. I want to finish with this slide. It's the interesting thing is that there's in Zurich an enormous diversity of housing types, and there's lots of experiments. There's really everything, and that's really cool. They're very, very cool projects. And I like especially also this aspect about retail, handicraft, and living, to combine working and living. In Holland, for instance, you have many ZZP, so people having their own enterprises. And this is an example how it can be done. And that's also important, that also the economic factor of the city should be taken into account. I want to conclude with four, I think, main things. It's about public authorities. I think I've shown you can really use cooperatives also in the long term as a cost-efficient urban planning and steering instrument. It can answer to the great challenges of the future. So take action and support this. For initiators, I think a thing is about, for instance, financing. You really need a professional organization to, or you should have a certain professionality, but the models are so diverse and there's so many possibilities. So just get expired and act as you wish. But I think a thing which is important is to convince user and inhabitants that it's not about investing, it's not about an investment, but we have to convince people that housing is like a service. Like for me, it's so comfortable. And at the end, architects and urban planners, it's a very interesting challenge, and take it and make good projects. Yes, that's for me. I'm finished. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward also to see Lina's input about Mietshauser Syndikat.
Yes, thank you, Han. That was a very inspiring talk you gave us about the Swiss examples, and also one becomes enthusiastic if you want it or not. So I could imagine that people want to jump on this bandwagon immediately. But you are in Switzerland. So the question would be, is this, you were also describing how this already exists in Switzerland for 100 years. So maybe I could imagine that there is also a relation between these cooperatives and the uniquely Swiss tradition of the direct democracy. But would it also be possible for countries like the Netherlands or the UK or Germany to adopt this method? Or are there a lot of regulations and policies that need to be adjusted?
Mm-hmm. Well, Zurich is maybe a special case also within Switzerland. And there are also other cities like Basel, which didn't have so many cooperatives. And they looked at Zurich and they found out, yes, it's so practical. You can do so many more things with everything in your city. So I talked also about cultural activities, with social. It's everything. You can even regulate your mobility plans with it. And so Basel now takes also a new initiative to promote these corporations. And of course, Basel already had cooperatives, but not so many as in Zurich. So that's why I think also in other countries where you have maybe more history of social housing, like in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, I think you can. It really is possible to change this. It's just there are lots of other models, of course, how you can organize the housing in a city. But I think there are these three challenges, and especially this retreating government is very difficult. So the social housing in Holland, for instance, it's difficult to realize, and I think these cooperatives they help a lot to react on this challenge of a retreating government.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if there are questions from this audience or in the chat. Or if not, then I would like to go to Lina Hurlin, who is in Germany, in Leipzig, I think. And Germany is, like I said, home to a solidarity network of more than 150 non-profit and deprivatized house projects, which is quite unique, I think. So Lina Hurlin from the Mietshauser Syndikat will share with us how this network operates. She is, I don't know exactly her background, but I know that you are an activist dedicated to the right of the city and good housing for all, and that you have been active
in the Mietshauser Syndikat for more than 7 years already. So what actually is your background? Are you?
So, hey, thank you for the invitation first. I'm a bit sad I couldn't make it to Rotterdam, but yeah, I'm happy to be here anyways. So I live also in a project like from the Mietshauser Syndikat, so this is maybe how it all started. But then I found that one building wasn't enough, and I started to also counsel other projects who want to become part of the Mietshauser Syndikat. I do it just like that. It's not my profession, so I don't get money for it. Yeah, but I'm also an urbanist, so I studied urban studies, and yeah, That's kind of what keeps me busy. So I want to start to introduce the Syndikat to you. So it's based on two ideas, I would say. So the first is that everybody has a right to adequate housing, no matter how high the income is or what the social background is. And the second is that that society should be based on solidarity, and also the network of houses are a solidarity network. So unluckily, we all face a problem, and the problem is called capitalism, and it's not very compatible with the idea of fair housing, especially in the last years in the bigger cities when people invest a lot in real estate and the market flourishes, and it's all to the regret of the tenants. So here comes the Syndicate, and it was founded in the 90s in Freiburg. The pictures are some of the people who started the Syndicate. I wasn't there then. I joined later, but the idea was to fight the neoliberal housing market with its own weapons and find a fitting solution to the core idea of collective housing. And the outcome is a self-organized solidarity network of housing projects. Right now, I always have to look it up because it's changing so fast and it's growing so fast. But today it's 158 projects and it's 19 initiatives. That means that it's groups who also, still work on contracts, and it provides housing for about 4,000 people and has a financial volume of about 150 million euro. So I didn't really bring pictures of houses because they all look so different. So the smallest project has 5 inhabitants, the biggest project has 280. Some are on the countryside, many are in the city. It's like maybe one third on the countryside or in smaller cities, and the rest is in bigger cities, for example, Berlin or Leipzig or Hamburg. And also the way the people live together are very, very different. So some just live together as a whole group of 20 people and share one kitchen, and others have just I think in the cooperatives in Zurich have their own apartments and maybe share some common spaces. So yeah, I didn't bring pictures because there is no picture that would represent all the projects. But there is a movie, I think it's uploaded on Facebook also of your school, so you can watch, and there are some projects introduced, so you can have a little imagination of how people live in the Mietshauser Syndikat. I'm going to talk a lot about ownership and legal forms, because this is actually what unites the syndicates. So people live very differently, but the ownership construct of the housing is always the same. There are kind of 3 pillars. So one is that it's collective property, and this is the most important thing, there's no chance of a reprivatization. This is also what makes it what makes a difference to associations or Genossenschaften, like in Zurich, like cooperatives. So this is there's absolutely no chance that the houses, once taken away from the market, they just never go back to the market. This is what makes it special, I think. The second pillar is that the projects are all self-administrated and self-organized and keep their autonomy. So the Mietshauser Syndikat would not decide how you paint your walls or how the structure of living together is organized in the house. This is also why it works that all the projects are so different. And the third is a solidarity network, that all the houses are together in a solidarity network and make decisions together. So we meet actually a couple of times a year with 300 people and make decisions in consent. So it's also, I think, it's very interesting also for learning democracy to be part of the Mietshauser Syndikat. And yeah, so the network, Solidarity Network, is on one hand, it's about knowledge. So older projects would teach new projects or would help them organizing their structure. And the other is financial solidarity, which I will explain a bit later. So, okay. So in the next charts, I will, to understand how it works, I will try to explain the combination of legal forms, which is important for the to avoid the reprivatization. So the first thing that happens if people want to start a new project is they found an association. So those people you can see here would be the tenants of the house, or would be the people who want to buy a house together. And then the second thing is that they found an house LLC. It's the translation is not really clear in German. It's GmbH, so Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, which is kind of similar to the limited liability company, but it's not the same. But it's impossible to translate it properly into English. So the people first found a house association, and then second they found the house LLC. And they also become a member in the Syndicate Association. The Syndicate Association is where all the decisions are made and where new projects would be accepted to join the syndicate and so on. In the Syndicate Association, all the housing projects are members, but there are also single people who just like want to support the idea or interested in it. The Syndicate Association is a shareholder of the Syndicate LLC, which was another GmbH or LLC, and this LLC becomes shareholder of the house LLC. This looks really complicated. I have another chart which makes it maybe a bit clearer why we do that. So the house LLC, which is the company who owns the house where the people live in, is kind of split it in two parts. So the one part is owned by the tenants and by the house association, so not by the tenants in private, but by the association. And the other part is owned by the Syndicate LLC. This is because if like groups change, so maybe people, I don't know, come along very well and decide to start a project, and then 10 years later they find out that it would be a lot more attractive to sell the house because prices really went up, or the group I don't know, had a fight and they don't want to live together any longer. So then maybe if it would just be an association, that they would maybe sell the house. But the syndicate is part of the LLC and they would always say no. So they have a kind of veto right to the privatization of the houses. This is why we do that. Yeah. Okay, so I was talking about that already, no privatization. This is the most important thing. So the syndicate has a vote when it's about selling the house, and we always say no. So there's no chance that the syndicate would say, okay, you can sell it, and the houses would always stay in collective, and the low rents would always be there. Coming to the low rents, also there's a big difference between the houses. I think the cheapest is about €2 per square meter, and then it goes up to, I don't know, 12, 13. It really depends on on how the house looks like and how it's done, and also if it's on the countryside or in Frankfurt. I mean, prices really differ. When it comes to financing, I think this is also a difference compared to the Genossenschaften or the cooperatives, that many people in the Syndikat are not very rich, and that there are many people unemployed or students or however, so they would never be able to have their own property. And they also don't want it because they are all united in the thought that nobody should profit of anybody's dwelling. So to buy a house, you just take many loans. One part would always be direct loans. Most banks want it to be about 30%. Direct loans are loans that you can, get from friends, your family, and just people who want to support the project. And then people are just normal, just pay normal rent over the years, and the house company pays back the loans. And they want to do it very slowly. So we like to take many loans and don't pay back so fast, because then the rents stay quite cheap. And then also there's a solidarity transfer. So some part, a little part of the rent goes to the network, to the Mietshauser Syndikat, and with this, new projects are developed. If we go back to the slide, you can see that the core capital of the house LLC is splitted, and 12,600 are paid by the house association, and the other 12,400 are paid by the Syndicate LLC. So this is kind of a little help in the beginning for all projects to start. I wouldn't say that that it's all perfect. I mean, it's working quite well since the 90s, and we're still growing a lot. But there's also the question, how big can we grow? I mean, right now, if we meet, we're about, if it's not the pandemic, but we're about 300 people if we meet. So the rooms are getting bigger and bigger that we have to search for every few months. And also, I mean, it's 4,000 people, sounds a lot, but there are almost 90 million people in Germany. So it's not, it's maybe just a small beginning. Then the second is also that the question is if it's only a project for a certain scene, or if it's only in a niche, because it needs some to do all the work and to find a group and to get to know what to do. It's kind of all in the same social bubble, I would say. So this is one goal, to find solutions to also make it reasonable for the mainstream, and also to find it as a bigger project, a bigger solution for the housing question. And then the third is that the syndicate has its roots actually in the squatter scene. And of course, there's also this discussion that some people in the scene in the 90s once were squatters and now are kind of owners, although they're not owners with their in their private interest, and they don't have their private part in the houses, but still it's a discussion, and it's not that everybody is like, yay, it's perfect what you did. But I think the growth of the syndicate is what keeps us busy most. So we have to try new techniques of group moderation, because it's definitely a challenge to find to have good conversation and find consent with about 300 people. It's mostly 1 or 2 from each project coming. But yeah, we just keep it going and see how big we can grow. So yeah, I'm happy about questions now. I think that always makes it
I just
easier.
want to, thank you for the presentation. Yes. I would also like to clarify something.
Especially because the bubble that you described mainly consists of people without capital. They don't have a lot of money. So the initial investments for buying a new building, who does that? Is that the Syndikat LLC or something else?
So the house LLC is investor kind of, and the house LLC is just taking loans. It's taking direct loans at first from whoever, from other projects, from friends, from family, and then 20 to 30%. It's what the banks need to give you the other part as a bank loan.
And how do
banks and governments react to your organization? Are they in favor of it?
I could say mostly in the beginning, they're quite confused. So why would people do that? Why do you buy houses with such an effort and no private interest? But I think there are some banks who know us quite well and who know our concept and have some kind of trust that it works. I mean, it has already worked in 158 projects, so this works well. And also, I think from the governmental side, it's some dealers as a pilot project and say, okay, this could work out, but also, I mean, there are always people who think we're freaks and why would we do it? Yeah.
Well,
it's both. Yeah.
You were also talking about expanding your bubble. So
Yeah.
do you already notice interest of people which maybe don't have their roots in the squatter movement, but are more, well, mainstream maybe?
I mean, it's not all that we all have. I mean, it's 4,000 people, and then definitely not all in the have their roots in the squatter scene. But yeah, it's quite different. I mean, there's some punk projects in the city, but there are also family projects with, and I don't know, it's all there. So it's actually not only. So we have old buildings, but we also have new buildings. It's both. So the projects are just very different. And I wouldn't say that they're all from one very tight bubble, but still mostly somehow academic and left scene.
Interesting. And it's spreading, judging by the Vrijkoop initiative, which now exists in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So,
the Vrijkoop kind of copied the Syndikat into the legal system in the Netherlands, because it's always a challenge, I think, to kind of translate the legal forms into other systems. And there's also projects in France or in Spain and in Czech Republic. I mean, it's kind of spreading. There's also a work group in the Syndikat, the work group International, was trying to help people to copy the way how the Syndikat works into other legal systems. Yeah.
No, that's well, that is a nice little bridge to the next speaker, who is Darinka Czischke, and who we find, who we asked specifically to draw the lessons from your projects from Zurich and Germany, to translate them to the Netherlands in the first place, and maybe to other countries as well, because Darinka is the founder of the CoLab research group at the TU Delft, and she's also the co-founder of the working group Collaborative Housing at the European Network for Housing Research. So Darinka, can you give us
your reaction, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Michele, first of all, for inviting me to take part of this very, very interesting and relevant discussion. Indeed, for the last 5 years and a half or so, I've been busy developing conceptual models that help us to understand the re-emergence of a number of these type of housing forms across Europe, also in other parts of the world. It is a phenomenon, it is a movement, and we must understand that many of these forms are not new. They have roots, long-standing roots in many traditions, over 100 years, certainly the cooperatives. We've heard different variations and ways in which different initiator groups are starting cooperatives in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands is not one of the countries that we can consider as a strong cooperative country, in the sense that there is no such tradition of self-organized collective housing provision. For many, many years, decades, we have used to a very strong, highly professionalized social rentals sector. And this is actually one of the big challenges for a self-organized collective housing sector to emerge and to flourish in the Netherlands. So looking at abroad, looking at the wide diversity of examples can shed light on how can the Netherlands adopt perhaps and adapt certain elements of these models to integrate them in their own housing system, in their own society. Because taking a bigger look, I was very interested also listening to the speakers from early this morning. And I think we need to also reflect on what are we talking about when we talk about taking back housing. I heard different declinations of different understandings of cooperative housing, which actually cooperative already means certain things and different things to different people, depending on how you look at it, but also self-organization, collectivity, community, co-housing, a Baugroup, and there's a wide range of top terms or concepts that people use to refer this housing. But in reality, they are quite different. So we put them all under this umbrella. I like to talk about collaborative housing because collaboration is what unites people in these efforts. If they don't do things with others, then there is no housing project. So it's very important to take into account also why are we seeing the reemergence of interest in this type of housing? What motivates it? Many people have talked about the housing crisis, affordability problems. Well, if it is affordability that we want to fix, we might want to look a bit broader, because we cannot ask citizens to sort out structural failure of markets and states to produce affordable housing for the large numbers of people. This is a task which, in my view, is a public task. It's the government who ultimately needs to ensure that everyone with different means, different household conditions, aspirations, etc., everyone has the right to adequate housing. Okay, so let's not burden citizens who are trying to be innovative, who are trying to build a project with a shared vision with others. Let's not burden them with having to provide a solution to a crisis which is major. Okay, so I think this is the first thing we need to take into account. And then we see that while wanting to be affordable, cooperative or collaborative housing projects have a wider variety of motives. We've heard a lot about creativity and cultural activities that are being taken on by initiators in neighborhoods to revive a community spirit, to keep the neighborhood alive, to enhance the quality of the neighborhoods and the communities around, right? We've also heard about high sustainability aspirations. The Waren, for instance, is a very good example of how a group of initiators, pioneers, forward-thinking people with the knowledge and the networks, both social and cultural, they can realize a very advanced concept of circular housing project. Of course, not everyone can do that, and perhaps not everyone is willing to put their time and energy into this. So this is something that we also need to consider. Does everybody want, or is everybody able to put so much of their time and effort and commitment into this kind of project? I certainly do not think that collaborative housing or this type of cooperative housing is for everyone in society. Hence, my remark at the beginning, let's not assume or let's not expect that this type of housing will solve all of society's shortfalls in terms of providing adequate housing, right? So what about the Netherlands? For years now, I've been studying the Dutch housing sector. I started looking at the social housing, and actually my interest in looking at collaborative and cooperative forms came up from my frustration to see that why does the Netherlands, with such a strong and the largest social housing sector in Europe, Let's bear in mind that in relative terms, the Netherlands is the country with the largest proportion of social rental housing in the whole of Europe. A third of the Dutch population lives in social housing. So my question was, why in this country we are still dissatisfied with the affordability of the housing, the inclusivity, the tenants' participation, and a number of objectives that we see that cooperative housing claims they want to fulfill, right? And what I think is that we have a fantastic opportunity with the possibility for tenants to realize their housing cooperative within the social rental housing sector. So the first thing I would like to say is that let's not waste that capacity, that we have a lot of buildings, assets, stones, and we have a lot of tenants and we have professionals. We can work with that to make social housing more collaborative, more cooperative. So in other words, we can introduce the logics of cooperative and collaborative housing into the social rental housing system. A separate and parallel way to have a cooperative and collaborative housing sector in the Netherlands is to allow these emerging initiatives to flourish and to develop. And here we have a long way to go, because so far there are very few banks who are willing or prepared to take the risk, and I say it in inverted commas, to finance this type of housing. We see that the Waren, for example, they are getting money from a German bank. They are having to crowdfund. They also have their own savings and so on. Why can't the Dutch banks not trust, like they do in Switzerland, like they do in Germany? Why can't they lend to groups that are self-organized? That's a question that I think our government has to look at. What are the guarantees that need to be put in place to allow an ecosystem of financial actors, institutional actors, planners, etc., all the professional bodies that have to do with the realization of housing need to be aligned in the willingness to support the development of a citizen-led housing sector. And why? Because there are lots of people who want more from their housing. It's okay for people to want to just pay their rent and have the landlord take care of everything that needs to be fixed. That's a valid choice. But there are more and more people who want more. They want a community. They want social inclusion. They want higher standards of environmental sustainability. So Han, the way he was describing the cooperatives in Zurich and other people, I've been to Zurich, I've been lucky enough to visit these projects. It's wonderful. I mean, I personally would like to live like that. But I can't. I live in the Netherlands. It seems so uphill to try and live like that. Why can't we as a society not provide the opportunity for people who have the willingness, the energy, the time to realize their own housing project? We would have a more diversified, richer, architectonically, urbanistically, and socially richer housing stock and neighborhoods. I would like to also encourage you to look at France, because as a country with a large social rental housing system, I think the Netherlands could learn a lot from France. In France, also a country with a well-established social rental sector, providers are more and more working with groups of tenants who want to live collaboratively. And they are creating special task forces and systems to allow groups to develop their own concept of how they want to live, including common rooms, outdoor spaces, self-managed processes and spaces. So basically, they are doing what I described earlier, which is to take the collaborative and the cooperative elements into the established sector. In addition to that, we also have independent co-housing projects developing. And now there is, since 2015, a new law in the French legislation that allows the coopérative des habitants, so the resident-led cooperatives, a new legal form in France, to flourish. So that's just an example of how countries with an established social rental sector can refresh it, can revive it, and can give citizens the opportunities for more democratic, inclusive, and community-led housing options. And at the same time, we could start building, as I say, a citizen-led sector, which is independent and really a third sector for housing. So I would like to stop now and just leave you with an invitation, because as we spoke with Michelle a couple of months ago. We are at TU Delft planning a big project next year, and we would like to invite you all, also the Independent School for the City and all the listeners, to join us for the Together project. I will show you, many of you probably have already visited. This is an exhibition produced by the Vitra Design Museum in Germany about the architecture of the collective. And we are going to bring this exhibition to Delft from April to July. And we are going to organize a wide-ranging program of debates and discussions around this same topic. And well, I think there's so much more we can discuss, and there's so much more we can do together. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you,
Darinka, for your remarks, and I think especially your call for the better alignment of institutions, for banks, local governments, national government, all the institutions that have to do with housing. That resonates with the previous presentations that we've had, calling for exactly the same things. I'm looking around here to the audience if they have any remarks or questions, but I do see that on the chat there's a lot of questions to all three of you, I guess. So I'm giving the floor to Simone.
Yes, we have many
Microphone.
questions. Oh, sorry. Do you hear me? Oh, yeah. For Lina, there are some questions. I just read them out loud, so then we can talk about it. It's about one is, are the shares par value or indexed? I don't know if Lina is still there. Yeah. Oh. You didn't hear it? I didn't really get the question. Oh, sorry. The question is, are the shares par value or indexed? So do you buy them and that's the value of the share, or are they indexed during the years?
They are shares.
Oh. Another question.
I mean, no, it's not that anybody has a share or an interest in the house. It's just the group is lending money from private people or from the bank, and then they just pay normal rent, and over the years they pay back the loans. But it's not any private capital from the people who live in there, and they also don't have an interest in the in the financial evaluation of the house. So, yeah.
And then another question is, could rent lower for dwellers after retirement?
The rents don't really get lower. They stay the same over the next 100 years, which is, compared to what's happened in our surrounding, usually a lower rent. So the prices rise immediately in the city. I mean, for example, I live in Leipzig, and we live together with 20 people and bought a house, and we bought the house 2013 for about 75,000 euros. Right now it would be definitely $500,000, maybe even more, and we pay about €2 per square meter rent, or €2.50, which is like ridiculous compared to what you pay around us. Yeah.
Okay. Another one. If the mortgage is not paid, can the bank privatize the building?
Sorry, say again.
If the mortgage is not paid, can the bank reprivatize the building?
In theory, it could happen that like some banks are written in the Grundbuch. I have no idea how to translate. Maybe you have, Han? So some banks could, so they write themselves in some kind of contracts, where I can't translate now, sorry. And it could in theory happen, but the syndicate would never lose a project in that, because we're so many and so big. So if there's a project who really has financial problems, or it also happened right now that there are like people moved out of a project because the group didn't come along any longer. So the house is empty now, and the syndicate is just paying the what has to be paid. So the kind of rental costs until a new group is there. Yeah.
And then the last question is a more general question. Not specific for you, I think. If in the bank loans, that's not specifically for you, but it's more general. In the bank loans that cooperatives can get, do the richer people in the cooperative stand as a guarantee, or is everyone just as much liable?
So for the syndicate, it's not that anybody is liable privately. It's only the LLC who is taking the bank loans, and I think it's the same with the cooperative.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let's leave it at that, because there are many questions. We will later maybe ask you through mail and then get back to the people who did the questions.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Ja. Nee, ik hoef hem niet. Okay, so then I would like to thank you, Lina, Han, and Darinka. And well, also thanks to the viewers at home for being with us during this third part of Taking Back Housing. And we'll return in 15 minutes for the final part. Oh, for the final part of this symposium. And in this fourth part, we will look at the next steps and the ambitions to truly make a step forward to more collaborative housing. We now know we should say collaborative housing in the Netherlands. So see you then. Good afternoon, everybody. We have arrived at the fourth and the final part of the symposium Taking Back Housing, organized by the Independent School for the City and the International Newtown Institute. My name is Michelle Provoost, and I applaud all of you who are still with us, and I welcome those that have just tuned in. We organized this symposium to help to democratize and challenge the conventional planning methods in the field of housing and to strengthen alternative routes and solutions. We've heard from many experts and examples, but now it's time to get to work. So in this last part, we will not only focus on the ambitions of Dutch cities to work with alternative forms of housing, but we will also discuss how to make those dreams become a reality. Which steps do we need to take to create an alternative housing playing field, and who needs to take the next step? We will do so by zooming in on the ambitions of Rotterdam and Amsterdam. After the presentation of each city's plans and policies, two experts with personal and professional experience on the topic will reflect on the plan and discuss the obstacles and possibilities for that city to make the necessary steps. We'll start with Amsterdam, and we will do so with Marije Raap, who is the manager for the program to enlarge possibilities for housing cooperatives in Amsterdam. Welcome, Marije.
Hi.
Am I introducing you right?
Yes, that's right. Shall I start the presentation, or?
Please do. Yeah.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and hi everybody, wherever you are. We'll hope to be. I hope this will work. No, I have to. And then go to the first slide. Well, thank you for being here. It's a very actual topic in this workshop, and I'm glad to tell more about the Amsterdam project. I hope there won't be noise from the neighboring house, because next door an investor is renovating a house. So if so, I hope you can just consider it as a live experience of the Dutch housing market at this moment. The slide you're seeing now is the front page of a national newspaper last year. You maybe also recognize Gerard Roemer on the left, who is a member of the WARRE. And it's not very common that a Dutch housing project of this small scale reaches the front page of a national paper. But maybe this is because, as the headline suggests, it could be a revolution on the housing market in Amsterdam. My presentation will address the new policy in Amsterdam to enlarge the possibilities for housing cooperatives in the city. But as not everybody might know the planning context and the housing policy in Amsterdam, I'll first give you a quick sketch of the context, although a lot of the topics have been in earlier presentations today. But this context is important to understand why housing cooperatives are a solution, but could even be a revolution. I hope. So Amsterdam has a strong urban planning tradition. The city has a firm grip on the spatial quality of new build projects. And more important, the city is running out of vacant spaces for new projects. So the new ones will have to be built in higher densities. And also the new plots that are entirely owned by the city are becoming more scarce. The city aims to produce 7,500 dwellings a year. And the largest part of the production lies within the transformation of low density business parks or residential areas, either through infill or through demolishing and new build projects. Next to this, we've seen an incredible rise of housing prices in the last 5 years. The average price to buy an apartment in 2015 was around 300,000 euro an apartment. And in 2020, it has almost become 500,000. So buying a house has become very difficult for households with a middle income and of course also for households with a lower income. And this applies also to the rental sector. The middle income, people with a middle income have very limited possibilities to find an apartment. Sorry, this clicking doesn't work the way I want it. So if you look at the way the property is divided in the city, there is a lot of regulated housing. Almost 50% of the property is regulated rent. This is mostly owned by the housing associations. And also a very small part, 13%, is privately owned, and but there's also been regulated below the lower income rental border. I don't know the good word, which is 775 euros a month. And on the other hand, there is 50% free market housing, which is about 30% is owner occupied. And the other 50% is private rental sector. And in between these sectors, there is becoming an ever-growing gap. So this is one of the reasons housing cooperatives can be an answer to some problems. And in Amsterdam, the Dutch building practice has also been mentioned before in this conference, is very used to large-scale planning, very long processes. But in Amsterdam, since 2011, there has been a self-build project, and ever since, the self-build has become a solid niche on the housing market. The last 9 years altogether, this has resulted in more than 3,000 dwellings that are already built or are still being under construction. And this is also a very important place for the housing cooperatives in Amsterdam. The first 2 pilots for housing cooperatives, the WARRE and the Nieuwe Meent, were initiated in 2016 under the self-build program to make community-led building also affordable for lower and middle income incomes. So why does the city stimulate housing cooperatives? Maarten van Poelgeest has already given a clear summary this morning. One of the most important reasons maybe is that there are a lot of initiatives in the city. I just collected some of their logos, but there are many more. And another important reason is to stimulate to stimulate these cooperatives is that these cooperatives provide affordable housing, and it's not only affordable for short periods like it's used with commercial developments where the city makes agreements to rent them for 15 or 25 years below the affordable limit, but they will be affordable forever. Next to that, it provides a form of tailor-made housing. The regular building industry doesn't always provide housing for special forms of living, whilst the demand for this is increasing. For example, mixed generation living or elder people who want to share caring facilities. And another reason is that people want to have more influence on their direct surroundings. This means also the design and the maintenance of their house. And on average, collective housing leads to more social cohesion. And as the first pilots have shown, that projects by housing cooperatives can be feasible. And this is also a reason for the city to enable more housing cooperatives and do this on a larger scale. But to do this, you really need to have the right conditions. Well, the new policy, the action program, was adapted by the city council in the city government in May 2020, this year. And it aims to facilitate different types of housing cooperatives. And there are 3 conditions, I think, that are very important to succeed. The locations, to work together with the stakeholders, and the right conditions in which they can build. I'll quickly run through them, and I hope it will be understandable because it gets a little bit financial in the end. So first, the different types. This is a scheme with the different forms of housing cooperatives. On the horizontal axis, you see the 2 forms of ownership. On the left, you have the, I don't know, we call it in Dutch beheercoöperatie. It's kind of management maintenance cooperative. In this form, the real estate is still owned by another owner, but the cooperative is tenant of this owner. And they do the daily business and the maintenance, the small maintenance things. The right column is the full ownership cooperative. This is, in this case, the cooperative owns the real estate. And in case of new build projects, they also are the project developer, like the Warm. So you see on the vertical axis that they can exist in already built buildings. Above on the right is, for example, the form that was stimulated by the housing law. Adrie Duivenstein was responsible for the possibility to challenge the housing associations as a tenant. And on the left below, you see Acropolis. This is owned by a housing association, and it's rented by older people who together have their cooperative, and they share, for example, a room for meetings. Well, maybe the most important condition is to have locations. In the action program, there are, for the short term, 13 locations appointed, and these add up to more than 800 apartments altogether. The aim for the city is to add an average of 350 apartments a year. And the size of these locations differs from 30 apartments to 100. And there will also be 3 projects on a very large scale. I'll come to that later. Another important feature is the professionality of the housing cooperatives, and you might also say of the local government. A lot of skeptical people will ask, are housing cooperatives professional enough to build? Well, we've seen with the Warre that they are, and the 3 cooperatives that are already developing in Amsterdam, the Warre, the Nieuwe Meent, and Beiersdorp, they are small-scale initiatives, and they can organize a lot of the things themselves because of their skills and also the networks they have. But the program aims to make it accessible to a larger public, and to make it feasible on a larger scale. It's important for all stakeholders to work together, to share the knowledge and the experience they have. So Woon, with an exclamation sign up front, is an organization, non-profit organization that advises tenants, and Clemens Mol, who works for Woon, has also helped us a lot in the process of making this policy. But they provide courses and information for initiatives that are starting, but also for initiatives that are already a little bit further on the way to establish their cooperation. Then there is the initiatives that are, a lot of the initiatives in Amsterdam have joined in a platform. It's called Platform Amsterdamse Wooncoöperaties. With this platform, we will discuss a quality mark. This quality mark could be an indicator of the professionalism of the group. And the platform also wants to play a role in sharing knowledge. And the municipality, of course, also has a role. Besides locations and processes, the municipality has a website with information, and we organize meetings. This way we enable initiatives to meet and exchange knowledge. And for who is interested, the 28th of November, there will be an online zelfbouw market. Usually it's live, but this year, unfortunately, it's not possible. But for people who speak Dutch, look at our website and you can find more details to join. Another important condition to make the development feasible is to have a clear process, because not every initiative can stay together for 6 years. 6 years too long for these kind of projects. And this is also very important that the land use plan makes housing possible. To make the process accessible for citizen groups, we don't ask a design or very excessive, excessive not the right word, a very big, we don't ask the highest bid, and we don't ask an architectural design to join the tender, but they do have to do some work. We ask, for example, a business case and also the description how they will organize themselves. And during the process, the deposits are slowly increasing, not like in a regular development where the developer will have to pay and deposit a very high deposit in the beginning. Nevertheless, this process is still a big effort, as you might have heard this morning. But it enables groups to go through it faster than when you shouldn't organize it this way. Well, now we come to the more financial part. An important tool in Amsterdam to create the right conditions, and it's been mentioned before, is the land lease system. This is a map of the city of Amsterdam. As you can see, the city owns a lot of land. The yellow areas on the map are leased to real estate owners. And the price of the land is defined by the function that is allowed on it. So in that sense, it's always market driven, but the value, if it's market driven, also can be defined by restrictions. And this makes it possible to have an adjusted land value for cooperative houses. So how does it work? The the value of land is determined by a residual method. So you have the market value of the apartment minus the building and the development cost. So what the constructor costs, but also what the architects and all other advisors cost. And what's left behind is the value of the land. So that's the red in the diagram on the right. And if you have an area with a high market value, of course, the value of the land will be higher with the same building costs compared to an area where the market value is lower. So this is the way the whole system of land value works in Amsterdam. If you translate this to the housing cooperatives, you would have on a certain area in the city a market value. But housing cooperatives, they don't aim to make profit, for example, and they don't aim to increase the rent more than necessary. So with these restrictions, it's forbidden to sell the right, the land lease right, and you cannot increase the rent more than just the index of the incomes that is average every year in the Netherlands. This is an index that is registered centrally. This way, you have restrictions that push down the market value and also help make it possible to ask a lower land lease value. And another advantage of the land lease system is that people can choose to pay it all at the beginning, the complete value, or to pay it every year. And the last option makes it possible that you don't have to finance the land through the bank finance. This is just a picture of cash flow. I'm not going to explain it, but the land lease is one of the parts to make it financially easier, but that's not enough. The building costs and the acquisition, if you have a real estate, they still have to be financed. And we've looked at the cash flows, the revenues of the rents, and when you subtract for the building costs and the maintenance costs, in the end you have a positive cash flow, but still Dutch banks are not very eager to finance housing cooperatives. And if so, they will only finance 70% of the value of this, of this cash flow, you could say. So depending on the own money a housing cooperative can bring in, or other ways they find to collect money, and the 70% of the value that the bank finance, there is a gap, and this theoretically is a gap between 0 and 30%, but in practice it will be around 15 to 25%. So we also looked at when people are constructing a housing cooperative, the biggest financing problems are in the first years, because you have to organize the project, you have to get expertise, either heuristic or architect, you have to finance the building itself, and you don't have your revenues from the rents because there is no apartment yet. So this beginning phase is a big problem, and also the first years there are not enough rental incomes to finance it all at once. So only after 10 to 15 years there will be enough, we call it eigen vermogen. I think it's called equity capital, but it's enough own money in the housing cooperatives that banks will say, okay, we will refinance it. And at that moment, there won't be a very big problem to finance the cooperative anymore. So this is a notion that's important for the financing arrangement that the City of Amsterdam is right now working out to a loan. And that loan is supposed to fill the gap between the loan inlay a cooperative can organize and the financing by the bank. This is just an example of on the left you see the total costs when you build. So the orange is what it costs to build, the constructor and the advisory costs, and the red one is the land lease costs. And to the right, you see how it's very schematic. It could be financed. You see 65% through the bank. A part is erfpacht, land lease, and the rest of it, the green is own inlay. The city says the loan demands 5% of own inlay from every housing cooperative, and the rest is possible to loan. This loan, we're working on it. We hope to have it running the first half of next year. And then again, we are also analyzing the possibilities to have a fund in analogy to the Swiss funds, where in this way the loan the municipality will provide the first years will be taken over by another funding system. Then finally, also part of the action plan is our 3 bigger projects to test if housing cooperatives can also be organized on a large scale. In these projects, we will test not only the possibility to organize cooperative housing projects on the scale of a neighborhood, for example, 200 to 400 apartments, but it is next to testing at a big scale also an opportunity to develop neighborhoods together with the future and local residents. These projects are inspired by the Zurich method, like the Meer als Wonen project, which has already been realized a long time ago. And some competitions the Atelier Rijksbouwmeester has organized, like Who Cares? And these projects will, of course, be adapted to the local conditions in Amsterdam. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marije. I think one important conclusion for me would be that Amsterdam as a city is actively stimulating and applauding this new way of housing production, has a vision, is devising the instruments, also the financial instruments to to stimulate this program, and especially important seems to be the fund for the non-financeable gap between that the bank will not finance. So this is all recent visions and policy that you are describing here, which seems to be very forward compared to other cities in the Netherlands. Is that true?
I think so. But I haven't seen the story of Rotterdam yet. But so far, and it has had a lot of political support, and I think that's important. And I think for the moment, but in Arnhem, Nijmegen, I think they are also trying to do things, and there are like earlier on has been said, there are many forms to do this. So I think in other cities this can also be possible in another way, and maybe the housing associations, they also sometimes play a role in this. Mm-hmm. So I think, in the case of self-build, new build, we really are ahead, I think. But I think Eindhoven also does something. So I'm not very expert on the comparison, which city is more or less.
No, we can of course
compare it with Rotterdam later on. But for now, we ask for a reaction to the Amsterdam Plan, and also a reflection and advice from 2 speakers. And the first one being Marc Koehler, who's an architect and the founder of Marc Koehler Architects. He's also the initiator of the Superlofts system. And you could say that he is also an exponent of a a different kind of building production, housing production, but not necessarily for collectives, but with the Superloft system, he devised his own system of developing housing. And Marc, could you tell us something? Well, actually, I know that you want to show us something also. So maybe we should
say welcome to you and immediately start with your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you start the presentation, please? Mike. Mike will press on start, I think. Yes. Next slide, please. Superlofts has started in Amsterdam in the Houthavens, and then experimented with cooperative ownership, co-housing, in 3 plots, and then developed with residents a plot in Amsterdam North, then in Utrecht, in Delft, and now in Groningen and in Hoorn. So Superlofts is a format that builds core and shell units like this one, in which the owners can customize their own interior by building in floors, rooms, etc. But they also choose services and facilities together, and they decide how sustainable the building is by investing together in solar panels, electric mobility, shared gardens, and these kind of things. Next slide. We are linking all these different communities on our Super Living website, part of the superlofts.co website, where you can see the stories of different inhabitants and also the makers. So the designers are also present there, which then can be hired again by other individuals who want to design their own Superlofts interior. So we try to become a meeting ground for all these different people, also online. Yes. We can look at this video that shows how the building system works. We have started with a concrete prefab framework that you can customize to different locations. Intermediate mezzanine floor is, let's say, cantilevered, hanging on the ceiling. That allows you to keep a free and open ground floor. This shows that everyone can create their own dream house within it, like this one by Urban Echoes Architects inside Superlofts in Noord. And it makes very qualitative housing affordable for a large group of people, because we also develop without profit. So we fix the real estate, let's say, costs from the beginning. And since we build only without a profit, all the benefit goes back to the inhabitants. And it's like 5 to 10% cheaper than a real estate agent, a real estate developer would charge. This is only possible because cities are offering affordable plots of land, like the city of Amsterdam has been a real kickstarter in this, and Utrecht as well. But now prices are rising. It becomes more and more difficult to achieve this. So my question also to Marije is, how can we scale up in a way that we are not limited to those limited plots by the municipality? How can we stimulate the commercial housing market and middle income rental segment to also adopt these principles? Here we see some of the typologies that we are developing now for commercial housing with developers, where we offer a lot of diversity in the mix of apartments that can also change over time because they're built in a flexible manner. It's called open building. This is also an important aspect, that you have to make sure that the building can adapt a lifelong learning for the building over time. Through this kind of Mentimeter sessions, we give people the possibility to co-design the buildings with us and the developer. And this creates a huge sense of belonging. And when you look at sustainability, not only the energy systems are important, but also connecting this to water system, biodiversity, waste, and capital, but also social services and social sustainability. And the result is now different locations throughout the Netherlands. London and California are also interested, and where we are researching sites. Even Google has approached us to collaborate now for a new site. And we really hope to bring these principles to the housing market on a larger scale. Next slide, please. So as Superlofts, we offer these kind of services to different communities, feasibility studies, advice on what kind of housing types fit well with different user groups, and how to organize the process of co-creation. And then the community maker is a way we advise on how to build communities through marketing, social media, and process management of co-creation. Yeah, next slide, please. The next Superlofts are on their way. Yes, please, next. We do different kind of projects, like this Kopwees per Trekvaart CPO project. We are just an architect and process consultant. CPO is a private ownership cooperative. And so this is not the rental cooperative that we are discussing today. Next one. In Hoorn, we are doing something more radical and innovative, which is with a housing association, Intermares. Next one. And we have co-created this building with the future residents, rental residents of this housing association. Next. Together with the Wijde Blik, we are doing online co-creation sessions where people respond live to different questions. For instance, they have to answer the question, why are they think they are the ideal future resident of Block 14? And the answers are quite interesting. So people are really socially interested to build a social community. They are longing for human contact, for sharing things, to belong to a group. I was really appalled. These were 200 people in this co-creation session, and we got 200 people actually saying they are really longing to get out of kind of a more isolated individualist society and lifestyle and embrace a social collective approach. And next, please. We are through using open building systems, we offer all these kind of differentiations in housing types that people then can customize themselves. So we don't want to decide everything from scratch. We are giving people kind of a framework that they can fill in and color in, which makes the process very fast and appealing and affordable. Yeah. The collective spaces are also designed and positioned in this way by using the Mentimeter interview method. We program the building, and at the end, the people are also going to take care and maintain the building in exchange for a discount on their rent. They will also form their own committee that decides who is going to enter, new residents, on which criteria new residents can enter. And they will define their own rules for managing the building. Yes, next, please. So now we are co-designing the garden with them, showing different possibilities. And then in brainstorms, choosing together the best options for this community. Yes. So another platform that I can recommend is Platform 31, where commissioners and consultants can find each other, and would really stimulate this sharing of knowledge. So my question, I think this is my presentation. Thank you very much. And if I could raise a question to Marije, I already know which one it's going to be.
So go ahead.
Okay. Marije, so my statement would be that...
Alert from calendar.
Sorry.
MKM.
Moment. Oops. Yes. Always the same. Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. You say there is a discount on the land for housing cooperatives. Let's say the pure form that Amsterdam says calls full ownership cooperatives. Compared to, let's say, middle income rental sites, there is a discount on the market value. Right? As you showed this diagram, you have market value, and then the land lease price is lower for a housing cooperative. My statement would be is if you would that this is actually limiting the scaling up of the housing cooperatives, because I see many possibilities to turn commercial housing initiatives into as a full ownership cooperative, but the developers will never go with it because they don't have the benefit of this land lease discount. Why don't you offer a similar discount to commercial initiatives that are willing to turn their commercial initiative into a full ownership cooperative? Because then you would have many more plots available in the city that actually follow this logic.
Yeah. Marije, go ahead.
The logic, when the housing cooperative is owner of the land lease, is land leasing the volume, then it is possible to provide this lower land value. So if the commercial developer is prepared, for example, 40% of their floors, theoretically, if they are prepared to offer 40% of their floors for a housing cooperative, and are also prepared to sell this part of the building for a reasonable price to the cooperative, then this cooperative can have the value of the land lease for a cooperative, because then they fit into the definition. The City of Amsterdam has defined a housing cooperative as it is vereniging. I don't know the English word for it. Not association.
Union or as a co-op, an association. Yeah. Yeah.
So the members that live there own the apartments altogether. And it will be a bit technical now. Usually apartments are split into separate units, and they are bounded together by a vereniging van eigenaren. So all the owners together, they have to unite and they decide about the building. But with the housing cooperative, this is not made. So the whole land lease is one not dividable legal thing. And if the commercial developers are prepared to sell a part of their development to this non-divided group of people, I think it is technically possible to have this land lease for this group. But it won't be possible to just give the discount if you don't have the restrictions.
But so if you have a middle income rental project, you can also decide to give the ownership to future residents. And then you will also get the discount on the land lease.
Yeah, well, of course, this has to fit into the context of if it's a tender that's already done and these kind of things, about the complexity of these processes. But if you in advance or in its because these transformation projects, often there are already owners of the develop of the area, or people who own the land lease at that moment, or developers that have bought the land lease, they have to be prepared to do this, because there's not so many financial incentives to do this. So it's
I
not
think
only technical, it must also be interesting for these parties. And I think that's maybe the challenge, to
I
interest
know that
them.
we asked for detailed and technical advice, and I do appreciate it. But yeah, and I've never been the first and foremost to understand the whole financialization and the residual land value aspects of this discussion. But I would say that let's continue this discussion a little bit later. And let's stick to the main issues here. And before, I would like to just make one conclusion
from your presentation, Marc, and see if I'm right, because it's we've been discussing different flavors of housing corporations, collaborative housing. Today, different kinds of constructions, but it seems that you are on the far side of the diagram that we discussed before, in the sense that even when it's a co-housing project or a collective project, you still put the architect in the center of the process. So there is still, the architect is the mastermind even of the collective process. So the architect uses the Mentimeter to create a community, to define the gardens types, but he offers the 4 kind of choices that inhabitants have. So it is more like a very sophisticated model for participation than it is really a residence project. Am I right in that?
Not in Block 14. So the Block 14 with Intermares Housing Association, definitely not, because they're the housing association has formulated the way the process is organized and the way the choices that are given to the inhabitants. So they form the kind of process management organization, and they go quite far. So they also ask future residents to think about what kind of rules they want to embed within the process to make the choices, for instance, about the garden. Do they want do you want the architect to present 3 options, or would you like to choose your own gardener that comes up with possibilities?
Mm-hmm. And how about the ownership of these projects?
The ownership, of course, stays at Intermares, at the housing association. They have 8,000 units in that area, so they can offer a lot of services in a very affordable way. But they try to have full advantage of the participation process of future residents to create a unique community that is, in a way, also exclusive. People have to apply to become a member of this community. They will set their own rules. They will co-design the building. So, and the rental are kept by the, let's say, social housing rental. So the rents are lower than 600 euro per month, I understand. So in a way, it has the same result as one of the Amsterdam cooperatives. It's a unique building tailored to a unique community and affordable. So I find that a very interesting new market, and I would really say let's approach all the housing associations with this idea to make more customized products that really involve the future residents. It's not only the housing cooperative, as we see as a maintenance cooperative or full owner cooperative, that is coming to the solutions we're looking for.
Yeah, this offers yet another flavor in the whole.
Yeah, but since 40% of the housing in Amsterdam is owned by housing associations and housing cooperatives maybe have only 1% or less, it is maybe a very interesting market and to research as together. But that's also a question to Marije. How does she see that in Amsterdam, for instance? Is this already happening?
Let's first go to the
Third speaker in this block, who has yet another perspective to offer, which is Jacqueline Tellinga, who is sitting next to me, and who has been working on self-build schemes for more than 10 years in Almere. Who was actually one of the pioneers of this work, I would say. You're a planner and urbanist by profession, and well, the project manager of the Homeruskwartier. The remote controls over there. Could you tell us something about the critical conditions for self-built housing and the lessons you've learned during your 10-year experience, and what that would bring for the Amsterdam ambitions?
Well, first of all, I discussed it already with Michelle that it's a thumbs up for Marije. I mean, we can't improve the program which is being done at this moment in Amsterdam. It's not only because it is woon co-ops, which is a new thing, a new given, and it's a way of making also urbanity. But also, well, the numbers which Amsterdam is looking for, and also, well, what Marije was just discussing, that they were trying to introduce a fund to have it really as a firm part of the housing production. I can't think of any other city at this moment, really, in the Netherlands, who is doing it that good as they are doing. And Michelle was referring to my role in Almere. The thing which combines, which we have both in common, this is quite essential, is that Amsterdam and Almere have their own land. Amsterdam has leasehold, and if they don't have leasehold, they make their own land. And Almere is polderland, which is owned by the government, by public authorities. So having discussions about woon cooperations means that you must have land by yourself as a city. So I can't really give, sorry Marije, I can't give you really good good points to improve your program. What I could do, if you don't mind, I could just show quite shortly, let's say, the energy of people. I know we're talking now a bit, het spreken voor eigen parochie. I looked it up in English. I don't think it's a good expression, but it's a sermon for our own parish. But still, I would like to show you what you already know, but maybe the substantial thing of it. And I would like to conclude with, if I'm allowed, with two academics were quite interesting in what we are discussing today, and which might zoom out the whole item which we are discussing, because in fact we are a small group. Those who are really in favor of self-building, woon co-ops, might be present today, might be watching today, but in fact in the real world we're just a very small group. And there is a plea of being bigger, but I want to show you with those two academics why it's so essential to have more grip on growing this part of the housing production. So I can do it myself. Let's see, yes. Well, this is something which we can script quite easily, but it explains, it's not of course the Netherlands, but it explains exactly why the building production is still mainly done by developers, by institutions, because we had this big building boom to be dealt with after the World War. We did it very, very good, but I mean, nowadays there's no reason anymore to continue in the same way as we did in the post-war phase. But the fact is that also our government is really looking at especially the big institutions to take care of our housing production. This is a slide of, this is Almere, Homeruskwartier, where I made 1,400 plots for individual buildings. Not at that moment woon co-ops, they didn't exist by that then. That's the invention of especially Amsterdam. And then you see what's present. Then you see what's present within a society. And at first then you really see in the streets, they are standing here waiting for plots to be sold for which they want to participate. And I have to, yes, this one, sorry, back, yes. This is a slide of this Homeruskwartier. Most people know it by now. It's 1,400 plots in the beginning. Don't look at the circle. I mean, that's an urban choice that doesn't have to do anything with who gets the commission to build. Could have been a grid. It is about that people build their own houses, and this is in 2009. So I started to make the plan in 2007. So in 2009, then the first houses were erected to give you, to show you that it can be done also quickly. Because if there's criticism, it has also to do with that there's no speed in it. And this is how it looked a year ago. So within the circle, you have the individual housing. Also, in fact, a project of Marc Koehler, very, very beautiful loft project of Marc Koehler in the middle, where you see a bit more low, high-rise buildings. And on the side, you see what the institutional developers build, which is a copy-paste kind of production. Nothing against that, but the mix is interesting, to have the mix and to give the possibility to those who really want to build themselves to do it. And that's what's missing in general. In the Netherlands, it's 10-11% self-building, UK even less. Well, in Belgium and Austria, it's in France, it's 50, 60, even 80%. So different kind of numbers. And you can't say that someone living in Austria is a different kind of person than someone living in the UK or the Netherlands. So this is an image of the not yet finished area, of course, not yet finished because Amsterdam wasn't finished either, which is a very good example how we started the whole thing, building cities. We did it by ourselves with families, small scale, not by big institutions. And if it comes to criticism to this whole program, when I started in 2006, it was like people are not interested in doing it. And then the second thing was, if they're even interested, they're not capable of doing it. And if they're even capable of doing it, it becomes ugly. And this was the echo which we more or less ignored. And look at our histories of cities. I mean, this has been done by it's a civic initiative. And this brings me to, I hope I can explain this. I try to explain why I think this is interesting for us in this phase. The left, I suppose, is quite known, Thomas Piketty, and the right might be less known. He's he's Bas van Bavel. And one of them is an economist who made an historical survey. The other one is an historian who made an economic survey. And the interesting thing about, if we talk about housing, his book is not typically about housing, but if we talk about housing, then the interesting thing is that he says that, well, return on assets is more profitable than return on labor, with the exception of the last century. It might have to do with the world wars. So if that's a truth, then it means having your own house, which is an asset. You can earn much more by having your own house in comparison to being someone who has to rent a house. So the bone co-ops are quite interesting in this respect, because it is something in the middle. It is, especially as the city of Amsterdam is handling the woon co-ops, it gives the people with a lower income, lower incomes, the possibility to enter the housing market. They might be renters, but in the end they're owners as well. So this is a very interesting possibility to decrease the gap to those who own and those who don't own. And then if I add something which we all know, it's amazing that our government, when they started the government, and especially with Minister Blok, that they made this program to steer on free market rental houses. Free market means that the investors that can make their own rental prices. They can increase the rental prices. So instead of choosing for woon co-ops, we have a government who chose for a free market rental investors. This is something which should be said with the next elections, should be part of also for programs. And then I skip to Bas van Bavel. And maybe I have to show my own slide. Yes, no. The interesting thing about Bas van Bavel is that he has studied market economics, which he takes serious, who flourished and then decreased again. And that has been 3 civilizations, especially has been Iraq, it has been Italy, it has been the Netherlands in the beginning and the high and the late Middle Ages, and had to do with civilizations who prospered because the whole of the population had access to the 3 production factors, which are labor, which is capital, and which is land. So as soon as a civilization apparently can have access to all these three things, then there is some kind of economic development. As soon as you take 1 out or 2 out, then there's an elite who can, for example, the elite who has especially capital and the land, means that there is not an access anymore for the whole population to participate, and has also, according to his studies, it leads to a backwards situation of the economy, something which you don't want. And he's in fact warning also that it has already happened in the USA. It is happening in the UK more or less. He's warning the Netherlands as well, because this specific elite, except for the fact that they can prosper, that they can gain their fortune out of it, they also get the political power. And this brings me back to this small observation for the Netherlands. It is a small observation that this program that we had to steer especially on the free market rental investors, which come from the all states and from everywhere from the globe, steering on that. It hasn't been in our political programs, it hasn't been part of the elections, and it has never been compared with the benefits which we could get from the woon co-ops. And it didn't exist, Marije, by then. Maybe that's the only thing I could point out towards you. You should have started earlier. But it is something which I think might be worthwhile to stress outside the community who is now gathered here, to stress that we should make more comparisons with the competition. And competition is indeed the institutionalized investors and the rental sector in the free market. That's what I would like to add.
More comparison on all levels, on evaluation on projects, you mean?
A competition.
Oh, competition.
Yeah, more, sorry.
Okay.
More, we should, what is being said today, and which is being said also on local levels in smaller groups. There are a lot of local initiatives, but it's quite hard to reach the national agenda or to reach until now the national elections. Because, for example, we have this 2 million, 9 zeros, to get the housing production speeded up, which is being given to cities. And I'm more or less convinced this money is not going to woon co-ops. It's not going to individual builders, self-building. So that's funny. I mean, that shouldn't be like that. And apparently it's still accepted. We should stress the point that it is not a logical thing to do.
No, thinking of the presentation of Piet earlier today, I would say there is a lot of competition with free market parties, but it's always on the same level of that of money, and therefore the highest bidder usually wins, and housing co-ops can never win this competition.
Well, it starts already with tenders. You cannot enter a tender. Because in the tender it's being asked how many reference projects do you have, but if you build for yourself, you have one. So the tender structure is already difficult to enter, except for Amsterdam. Other cities, or maybe some cities I don't know of, sorry, but so also not known in the Netherlands, that it can be done differently. So in that sense, the presentation of Marije should be maybe cut out, if it's possible, and we should send it to aldermen because it's still unknown in the Netherlands.
And aldermen could also play a crucial role, like the example of Almere shows, where Adrie Duivenstein made this land accessible, right?
Well, we tend to think that housing, the program of housing, is being decided through our city councils. But then they have to do it. Mm-hmm. They should be aware of the woon co-ops, how it's being done in Amsterdam.
Yeah. Wouter has a question.
How do I pose it, Marije?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
Repeat it, please.
Oh no, I'll give it.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. I had a question for Jacqueline, especially thinking of your reading of the book or your showing of the book that you've read, Capital by Piketty, and you said that with. I think what I remember of the book is also that there has been a very short time in our recent history where equality. Went up. The equality and income equality, etc., went up, and that was in the period immediately after the World Wars, because there was such an enormous investment by governments in the building up of the industries of the cities, of the welfare state, etc., played a huge role in that. So I was wondering, and of course the massive production of social housing, so that also people and which was not just for the poor people, but for all the people basically. It was that was being done then. Now bringing it back to the Homeruskwartier, today we have been talking about these 3 models, right? We have the market model, we have the social housing model, and we need a 3rd model. Right? And that is what Homeruskwartier has delivered, what the wooncoöperaties are delivering, etc. But in the Homeruskwartier, the 2nd model, the social housing, is absent, isn't it? I mean, the state built social housing. If you want a real mix of a good city made of a real mix of all the house, like you said, we need the cookie cutter developers' housing, we need the people, the co-ops, we need the people building their own house. Doesn't a real city in the future also need just loads and loads of top-down built social housing by the government? And do you see that happening?
Yeah. Let's say, unfortunately, there will be always a demand for low-cost housing. And in our context, our social housing corporations are the very best. And it's a very good system in producing it. What has happened, and that's the downside of it, those who could escape it, the middle class, the lower middle class has escaped it or is trying to escape it, which makes it only inhabited by those who don't have so many chances already. So they don't have the good examples either. So we are getting to a new chapter when talking about social housing. And it's a chapter which has to do being more fragmented, present in the city, so that those who have little chances still see other references, examples around them. And then when it comes to, so we have to continue, but we shouldn't like the woonco-op, but we also had a program in Homeruskwartier which was called I Build My House Affordable. So there's still a group who is capable of escaping the social housing stock, but cannot yet afford themselves to enter the purchase market. So this big group, it's a very, very big group. For them, it's essential to find the interesting programs. So that's why the woonco-op is interesting, and we had this I Build Affordable, which was only those who had earned 36,000 a year, which is the level, the maximum level of the housing associations. We more or less gave them we participated as a city in building these houses, and as soon as people started to earn, they started to pay back. And this is a very good program as well.
With that, I would like to leave it at this, if you will. And because it's time to turn to Rotterdam for the final session, and we'll do basically the same. We'll have a presentation of the Rotterdam policies for housing cooperations by Annette Akkerma first. And Annette Akkerma is the policy advisor for housing for the municipality of Rotterdam. And in her portfolio is also innovative housing and living. And she will now share with us the housing cooperation ambitions of our city. Go ahead.
Annette Akkerma.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very good introduction. I have to say I'm very impressed about all the stories about Amsterdam, Almere, and I have to admit we have the plan is admitted, the action plan for cooperative housing in March this year. So we are in the beginning, but we are doing very nice things, and I will tell you about it. I have to share my presentation. Let me look how it works. I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We just thought you were in Italy, somewhere outside, but apparently not.
No, this is Rotterdam. It's a very green city, as you can see. And there's lots of space for gardening. And people are doing things together. So that's really nice. Well, I talked about that we have an action plan. It is admitted in March this year. And I have to, why did we choose for this action plan? If we look at the market, we see that it doesn't meet all requirements for cooperative living. We have also the conviction that it is better to live together and it gives better quality of life than institutions can bring.
Annette, sorry, can you put it
also
on screen?
Sorry?
Can you put it on full screen?
Oh, this is not full screen.
Not yet.
Better? Now it's full screen, isn't it?
No. No, still presentation mode.
Yes. Now it is full screen.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Let's go further. Well, the life is better when you live together, and an institution cannot provide that. Especially the involvement of people makes it more attractive to live together, and they also take control about the process which are necessary to manage the household of the complex. We see it as an alternative for individual renting or buying, and it's also the possibility for accumulation of capital. And of course, which is especially for cooperative living, are the communal facilities, like the garden, like the living room, like, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. But that's why we decided to admit to this plan. For Rotterdam, we see the market of cooperative living as a niche. But we are very interested in pilots. If anybody likes to start a pilot on cooperative living and cooperative housing, they are very welcome, and we will help them further. On the policy, we see especially opportunities for families, elderly people, and people in middle income. It comes from the vision of Rotterdam on housing and living, and it comes from the vision of longer living at home. Before March, we already started with Amsterdam Woongenootschap. We realized that it was very difficult without one single point of contact. In the action plan, I am the single point of contact, and I guide all initiatives through the municipality of Rotterdam. I'm advising about what kind of housing is most suitable. Is it a cooperative housing form, residential group, VVE extra, whatever you like. And what I also said, coordination within the municipality. And to be honest, that is a real, it is very necessary that someone takes coordination about that process. But I'm not alone. We have also the possibility to set up an experts team. And there are lots of experts within the municipality, and they are very enthusiastic about this initiative. But you have to coordinate that they together they make the right decisions or come to a good advice. For initiatives, we have a maximum of 250 hours for 1 year. And the experts are coming from urban planning, mobility, parking, area exploitation, whatever it's needed. And I will take control about that kind of processes. At this moment, we have already one pilot. The one pilot is het Rotterdams Woongenootschap for a second pilot. And we are thinking about a pilot for elderly people. To be honest, everywhere ground positions are very limited. We make it explicit because it's very difficult. I'm very jealous on the map of Amsterdam and Almere. We do not have, you call it lease ground? We don't have pacht any longer. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for gemeente Rotterdam to have ground positions. What are the experiences till now? Well, I already called the first pilot, Rotterdam's Woongenotschap. At this moment, there were 4 groups, and they told me that they like to start a new cooperation. But it is of ideas. And there is also a motion of the council for selling 5 buildings of the municipality of Rotterdam for middle incomes. That is very busy at this moment. It will happen this year, probably between now and 2 months. The first building will be sold. And we are still investigating a second pilot for elderly people. Well, this is what I would like to tell you about Rotterdam. I realize that we are in another stage than Amsterdam and also as Almere, but we are very open, and everybody who feels the need to visit Rotterdam to discover if there is a place, they are welcome.
So it's good to end with an open invitation. Thank you, Annette. And for reasons of time, I would like to immediately invite the 2 experts that we have invited for
to give their reflections on the Rotterdam situation, who are both architects, Laura Weber and Nienke Happel. You can sit over here. And maybe to start with Laura. Laura Weber, it's almost 20 years ago, I think, that you started working on self-built housing with, also in Almere, with the Expo 2001. So you stood at the cradle of the topics we are talking about today, you could say. Apart from that, you also gained personal experience with the topic because you live in the Wallis block, which is, well, also here in Rotterdam. And now you work at Urbannerdam.
Yes.
So, so what do you do there, and how does that relate to this whole topic?
Urbannerdam facilitates private building and CPO, dus collective private commissionship, and yeah, all sorts of things. And I was really happy with the quote that Peter provided about architecture. The art of architecture is what was it? To enable. I said, oh God,
price,
that explains why I changed from being an architect to being a consultant in this matter. I like to enable people to build their own house.
And if you look at the plan of Rotterdam to enable these kind of initiatives, are there any, from your experience, are there any advices and things that you could, the do's and don'ts that you could point out?
Well, I'm actually very happy with this initiative of Rotterdam, and I'm really happy that they embrace the whole idea of cooperations. I think I think it still lacks a bit of urgency, especially political urgency. It's a very yeah, I don't think it's very ambitious yet, especially not if you compare it to the actions of Amsterdam. And yeah, I think it's been said today many times, and I think great initiatives should be enforced by municipal real estate politics. We don't see that yet. And but I think it will come, you know, because I think I sense at the moment that there's a tendency towards relating the housing market more and more, regulating the market. Even the IMF is at the moment embracing more regulation, what I heard this week. And I think Rotterdam needs that for a healthy housing balance in the city. So in order to really accommodate housing for the middle income housing, I think Rotterdam really needs that. There's a lack of it, and housing cooperations can be a way to get there. I think we should go back there, and we should go back to actually assign a substantial amount of plots in the city to facilitate cooperative housing. And for instance, you could, as I think, for instance, the municipality can say, well, let's say a percentage, half of all the plots that we are selling, do that to cooperative housing, and stop believing in the free market to regulate housing. And I think that's been said today many times. And start using fixed prices again for those plots, for the ground politics, and base those prices on residual calculations. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure about. Well, I think Rotterdam is not as rich as Amsterdam. Rotterdam probably is a bit frustrated if they sell plots to developers and even private people, and then see the market go up and they missed all this money, things like that. In the Wallisblok, that was actually something that we noticed. Actually, I think the people in the Wallisblok, I think people know this project, so I'm not going to elaborate about it. But they said, well, we noticed a certain frustration that they gave this block away for free, and the people who went to live there, I think, well, their houses are much more. The prices are much higher now. Let's say we pay a lot more WOZ taxes than we did when we first got in. And I think there's a sort of frustration, and I think the city wants to get their share of what is happening in the market. But I think maybe we can have this picture, because here we see actually. Do we see it? Yeah, this is the Wallisblok, the first do-it-yourself the Klushuizen project in Rotterdam, and next picture is what it was. And I think the people who the people who started living here and got these houses for free, I think they had at least the guts to invest all their money in a neighborhood that was so bad that no developer wanted to do that. And but still I understand the frustration. I don't think they should forget what happened. And I think the good thing about housing corporations is that there's no speculation on the ground, so they don't have to be afraid of that. And I thought of something. Can we have more pictures, please? And I was thinking, you were asking. Oh yeah, this is about Spangen. It was very notorious in those days. Next, please. I was thinking, how can the city of Rotterdam get more money of the little plots that they have and that they do want to sell, although I don't think they should sell. I think if you would, you can allow, for instance, cooperations, if they buy a plot, to get a larger building envelope. Make an exception, and so the cooperation can offer more money for the plot. And if they don't want to build that high, they can ask, they can give this builder larger building envelope to plots that are for developers. So you can compensate, and in the end you have a good financial balance for the city. And it's a bit of a family thing, I think, high-rise. And I think we should be less afraid of it. Can I have another picture? These are pictures actually that were made by KCAP. There's not another one? Oh, the last one, please. We did this project with KCAP once, Rotterdam. It was a tender, and there was the question, how can we improve certain blocks in Rotterdam South? They wanted to make bigger houses, they want to make it more sustainable. How can we do that? And we thought of a system that by implementing a part of this block with high-rise, we can finance the sustainability of the rest of the block and the renovation, make bigger housing, and still have the same housing density in the Rotterdam South. It was also a way to keep the former residents of this block within the block, so they don't have to move out. So there shouldn't be, there don't have to be what you call the well, yeah, anyways, it's important that people stay in their block.
I know this is a model that both Rotterdam Woongenootschap as well as City in the Making have thought about, or even have tried. I think thought about and then rejected. So maybe we can use this for a reaction by you, Nienke. Nienke Happel, also a member of the Rotterdamse Woongenootschap, but also an architect with a big architecture firm in Rotterdam. Happel Cornelissen Verhoeven, which has become well known by award-winning transformations of historic buildings, mostly. But can you shortly summarize what your experiences are with the Rotterdamse Woongenootschap and how you would react to suggestions like the Plan from Rotterdam and Laura from Urbanerdam?
Where to look at?
Not sure.
For you. Oh, okay. Because I like to shortly react to Annette. Last time we saw each other in our office. At the end you said something like, I know we're in a complete different stage than the other speakers. And, you know, although I'm holding my breath already for 4 years, I think I should start by saying that it's okay that we're in another stage than other cities, as long as we know where to go to. Ari just whispered this to me, but it's so true. I think it says everything. It says something about communication, because if you know what's your shared value and what's the point on the horizon, you can collaborate and make collaborative housing, which should be cooperative housing, possible, I think. And based on that, I had just 3 short recommendations to the city of Rotterdam. You know, in a time where the inequality is growing, I would say we should cherish everything that is ours. And with ours, I mean everything that could be common or is common, so shared ownership. And in order to come there, in competing to the market, I think the first step for a city as Rotterdam is to start a revolving fund, which housing cooperatives can rely on for their primary plan costs, because that would mean a big step. That would give autonomy to cooperatives, self-organized cooperatives. And with this autonomy, a cooperative can be an independent party next to a housing associative or a housing corporation or a market party. And I think it's so essential, so I think that's why I want to stipulate. It's been said today over and over, but I think that's the most important step that Amsterdam took in showing that they take cooperatives serious, that there is this fund. Next to that is something we, while evolving the Rotterdam Woongenootschap, so that's my second recommendation, what we envisage, or what was a big problem along the way, is that everybody enhances the plans of a cooperative, which enables different kind of housing typology, which make a diverse, which gives diversity to houses, which is necessary in a diverse city if you want to make it to be an inclusive city, I think. Everybody likes it, and everybody likes the story. But that is housing policy. So that's about how we want to live in a city and how sexy we all think innovation is. But reality is that after talking so many years with everybody who likes the idea, is that when it comes to making a deal about land, or a deal about land, all different kind of rules and regulations start running, and they don't fit to each other. So I think very important for the city of Rotterdam is to let or to coordinate the housing policy and the land policy. They should fit on top of each other. And it's been said before today, but that means, or that asks from a municipality to define what is market conformity. And especially what is market conformity of land price for non-speculative housing. That's the main question, I think. But I think, to be honest, it's also about the will to reconsider land lease again. And it's been said before, Rotterdam stopped with land lease, but maybe when an idea of the cooperatives finds so much common ground, maybe it's an interesting question to re-ask. And next to that, I think it's very, very important to make tenders for selling land to develop, to put housing on top of it, or selling real estate, existing real estate, accessible again for non-speculative parties. It's been also said by Laura. It's like Daphne. No, Laura. Sorry. So by accessible for non-speculative parties. And I think that should be done by defining. So again, it's about the will to define things, to become precise and outspoken instead of keeping it in an average level. But it's about defining measurable award criteria for societal values. So next to financial value, you could talk together about what we as a society think is important, that we want to gain from a housing project. Like, for example, we want more shared gardens in order to take a grip to climate change, for example. And I believe by doing so that we get a shared focus on what is important for everybody, for the city and for the commons. And then the third recommendation, and well, that's maybe my favorite one, is to install a professional architectural competition system for housing projects in the city. No matter it's for cooperatives or for market parties, I think by doing so, the public conversation about how we want to live in the city, so not a single person, but how the society wants to live in the city, becomes transparently alive by means of imagination. So the power of imagination is, of course, a very strong to arrange change. But it also stimulates the experimental garden, the proeftuin, experimental garden of housing needs. That's what Google translates to. It also stimulates the experiment of housing needs of people that do not fit the standard system or do not fit the standard that is delivered by the market. And we met them as Rotterdam's Woongenootschap very often, like large groups that want to live together because they believe it's a nice way of spending your life. Or, for example, compiled families, so bigger groups of people living together, and they don't fit the standard small houses that are offered by the market. And well, that are the three recommendations, and I strongly believe that we really need debate and an open debate and experiment to gain new living standards that fit better the contemporary society that is in need of more equality and more sustainability and what I think less growth. So that's it.
Thanks. Thanks for your reactions. You mentioned 3 advices, but I think there's a lot more in there. Were you able to follow everything? And so can you appreciate these advices, and are they useful to Rotterdam, you think? And I could ask the same
to Marije, because I actually think there's a lot of tips and tricks in here, as well as the other way around.
Yes, the advices are very good. Some advices I already knew, like the revolving fund, and personally, I really find it's a very good idea of Amsterdam to have such a fund for the loans. Well, I cannot say I can take the advice with me, and I hope it will land. About the market conformity, I also I know the discussion. It is very difficult. And also the lease, a new introduction. Well, it's already, well, we are busy with it.
Well, that's good.
It is already going on. No, of course, these things are extremely difficult.
I cannot say, oh, this is what we're going to do, because everything is new, and everybody has to get used to the new concepts, and we have to win a world, to be honest.
And as the previous examples have made very clear, there has to be a political will behind this. It has to become like a priority in housing policies, and otherwise, of course, if you execute this plan, there is nothing to fall back upon. So, this is necessary. But looking at all the things that I've written down by now from both. From Marc Koehler, from Jacqueline, from Linke, from Ljubetic.
We could almost make, from Zurich and Mietshauser Syndikat, we could almost make a manual with advices that would allow for a smoother or better implementation of this kind of housing projects. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should take that task upon us. I would like to ask if there's questions or remarks from this mini audience that we have here, or from the other panel members, or from the chat. not so much, because otherwise it's been a long day. Otherwise, I'm taking advantage of this moment to to thank you all. Thanks all participants in this last panel, which I think was very fruitful. It's just been a little bit of a marathon this day, and I would like to round up basically with, first of all, maybe a short personal conclusion. This is always a difficult thing to improvise, but I would like to say a few things that have become clear to me this day, is that the housing corporations, for instance in the Rotterdam plan, it was talked about as a niche in the housing market. But I think when you take an overview of the whole day, it should actually be regarded as much more than just a niche. If you think about the pleas of Peter Kunstli and Maarten van Poelgeest in the morning, it is actually much more about the creation of a third housing production, a third housing sector next to the market and the housing corporations. So it's much more fundamental. And I think this is probably also one of the reasons that we organize this, because we have this vague intuition that now, in these Corona times, there is an opportunity to rethink some basic things much more fundamental than in a normal situation. And of course you could say we're going back to the restoration of the status quo, but maybe there's also a chance to introduce all these concepts in a much stronger way that we have seen today. And I also noticed that there was, especially from Zurich, I think, a whole list of characteristics of these housing corporations that very clearly stated these and these are the advantages. The advantages for the housing cooperatives, for the municipalities. For instance, there is a cost-efficient housing provision. The corporations build these cooperative projects themselves, almost without any cost for the municipality. I think that is something that should be told in the Netherlands as well. These housing corporations are a vehicle to get the sustainability agenda executed, but also they work against the inequality that slowly creeps up, well, not even slowly, that creeps up really fast in all Western European cities. And it's a way to keep the middle class in the city, which is, I think, has been priority number one for instance, Rotterdam, in the last few decades already. So maybe it's also a way to sell these kind of projects in a different way, not by presenting them as a niche for which profits a small number of people, but for the city as a whole. And of course, I think what makes these projects so sympathetic to me is that they all have slightly anarchistic DNA. So they consist of people who want to be their own boss and don't want to be part of a commercial building system. So I think that is a very fruitful position and something that we should support. And of course there need to be experiments to create a basis for this, and of course these experiments must have the chance to fail, because that is necessary for experiments. So I would say there's a list of things that should be done, like the support from the city, the vision from the city, the political statements, of course the land price, the land lease, the negotiations around land, The lack of instruments with the local governments need to be fixed. All of these things. And I would say, in the atmosphere of our school, I think we should say, let's just continue working on this and take a practical approach. And we'll be having this item on our agenda. So if you see other events taking back housing, then it means we are continuing with this topic. And I think we should round it up this day with that. Just a last thing, which is a thank you. Well, thanks to everybody, all the speakers online and in this room. But also some people in particular I would like to thank to Ewout, the technician, who has learned to become a sound and image technician overnight almost. I'm not sure how it went, we'll evaluate later. And also a special thank you to Mike, who was unable to participate in the discussion because we forced him to become a Zoom wizard. And I think he did really well. And also to Sasha, who has organized already several versions of this conference over the course of this year and had to do it all over again all of the time. Fully experienced. And of course to the Juriaanse Stichting for financial support. Then, goodbye all people in our audience on YouTube. I wish everybody good luck with the further steps. Thanks to the audience, of course, for taking all this time on this lovely Friday. And let's stay in touch. My name is Michelle Provoost, and this was Taking Back Housing. Hope to see you next time. And now the bar is open.